Hey, what's up, guys? This is Severen Henderson coming to you again with another episode of Department 3C Presents, a podcast. So today I had the pleasure of speaking with Tom Beers and Michelle Reale. They were two people I worked with back in my East Cleveland days. They both work for a major hospital in the Cleveland area. And when I first said I was going to do a podcast, Tom reached out to me and said, hey, I have a great presentation on human trafficking. Would you be interested? And I said, absolutely. That's what this show is about. I want to know about it. I want to get to talk about it. I want to do and speak to everybody about everything at any different time. So I really appreciate him reaching out to me and getting on with me to talk about. This is actually a part two. Well, it's not part two. It's a scrap and redo. We had another episode and time just kind of didn't work. So I had to record this episode on my own and send it in. So if the sound quality is a little different, that's the reason why. Most of the time, I want to try and do all my guests and get all my recording done in the studio, but this time that just didn't work, so we had to do it in a different way, which is fine, which is cool. Major thing for me is I want to get content out to you guys, and I want to have everybody have the opportunity to get a chance to listen. So, like I always talk about that analysis paralysis. If I sit around and think about what I'm going to do all the time and over-analyze it and then nothing to get done. So I'm out here shooting, throwing stuff against the wall, seeing what sticks. So hopefully you like the episode, appreciate the episode, and you get a chance to contact me and tell me what I can do better. Because criticism, whether it's constructive or not, I'm open to it. I don't have thin skin. Just tell me what I need to do to get better, because at the end of the day, I'm here to serve, and I want to make sure I'm putting out the best product for my listeners. To get in contact with me, again, Department 3C at all social media platforms, and just my regular email for now, to department3c@gmail.com. Those are all ways to get to me. Department 3C is on YouTube. Department 3C is at Facebook. Department 3C is at Instagram, and Department 3C is at Twitter. Going on down the line, like I said, we'll get into what Department 3C stands for, where it came from, how it grew, why it is what it is. It's a little story to it. Some days I say, well, I'm going to reveal the whole story about it, or is it going to be like a secret Maroon 5 band name type of thing where nobody knows what that stands for. So one day it'll come out, it'll get there. But just hang out with me, stay with me. We will get to why it is the case. So again, this episode is with Tom Beers and Michelle Reale. We will be talking about human trafficking. The episode we could have went on forever. We could have talked for a long time, but I was very fortunate to get the time I had to get from them. They're very busy people. They both have jobs. Michelle's actually has a doctorate of nursing. That's like super awesome. And I know she's been championing and working on that cause even before I left the Cleveland area when I was working with both of them around there. So they did an excellent job. Like I said, appreciate their time, appreciate them coming on. So after this little talk, they will come in with the episode, just tell their experiences, tell us what to look for in some of those human trafficking situations. They give their contact information, just the money situation. It's just a great conversation. I actually want to have them on again to talk about those issues again, because I feel like in our realm of public safety, we don't have those conversations enough. The story I missed telling in the conversation that we had when I was still am, fighting a fire on the west side of the city. I fell off of back porches and I injured my shoulder in this building, and I was actually carrying a person out of the building. So in injuring myself, I was laid up. I was gone. I wasn't able to work, and I was at home watching TV one day. And it was a show about pimps. And, pimping is just a culture within itself. So, it's like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like not a game, but it's just different. It's like I said, it's a culture within itself. People have pimping rallies and conventions, and they get together. Like if you ever see the Dave Chappelle skit, they do what's called the haters ball, and they kind of make light of the situation. They had Ice-T on the episode. Ice-T's real big into that culture. People meet up with their nice cars. They have glasses. They have suits. They're just very extravagant, over the top, things like that. But in the gist of it, there is some truth in it as well. So some of these people really live that life. They're really about that life, which is fine, which is cool. That's to them. I'm a person, to each their own, as long as it's not hurting anyone. Some of it does hurt people. But like I said, we talk about that in the episode. But to speak more to the point of me hurting myself at this fire, they're riding around recording these pimps in Chicago, and they ride past the building that I hurt my shoulder fighting the fire in. And I'm like, man, that could have been one of the places for the people to be in there that were being housed for the human trafficking. So just kind of, that's one of those times where reality just jumped up and smacked me in the face, just seeing that in that situation. We didn't get to, we talk about The Wire a lot. That was one of the subjects I wanted to talk about on the episode that I didn't get to. I know Tom goes over it, just brushes past it real quick. But just how that show, that second season was about human trafficking. So just all these different situations, conversations that I want to have on these topics and go over. So I am more than open for anybody to pitch anything to me. If you send it, I'll read it. If you talk to me, I'll listen to it. I just want to engage with you. So please talk to me. Send me something. Let's talk again. Again, the email address, department3c@gmail.com. And again, department3c on all social media handles. So with all that being said, please take a listen to this episode and tell me what you think, and look forward to hearing your conversations. Good morning. This is Severen. I'm here with Tom Beers and Michelle Reale. They're here to talk about human trafficking. So we had a preview episode. We started it before. We may add that in a little further down the line, but we're going to talk about this issue that they have and they brought to us. So for you guys, can you give me an introduction to who you guys are?
Ladies first.
Ladies first.
Thank you. All right. Hi, my name is Michelle Reale. I've been a nurse for 22 years and a forensic nurse for the past 15 years. My job is to take care of victims of crime that include elder abuse, child abuse, physical abuse, sexual assault, and human trafficking. So that's just a little bit about me.
Okay, Tom.
My name's Tom Beers. I've been friends with for like 16, 17 years now, proudly. Before he left. I am a firefighter in the Cleveland area. I also work as a hospital EMS manager at a large hospital system located in the Cleveland area.
Okay, that's great. Those are great introductions. So I started off talking about we're here to talk about human trafficking. Tom did me the favor of reaching out to me and say, hey, I have a topic for you. I see you got a podcast. We would love to come on and talk about the subject. And I said, thank you so much. I would love to have you on. So please give us the introduction of you guys, because I know you have like a pitch together. So just walk us through it.
So Tom, why don't you start? We can kind of go like the same route we do when we do our presentations. Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't have it pulled up, but I think maybe just by starting on why you and I got together on this project, and then we can maybe just define the differences between sex trafficking and labor trafficking, because you and I know this, but I'm not so sure everyone else would know what all that means. So
originally I would say maybe about 3 years ago, Michelle came to me after the Republican National Convention was here in the Cleveland area. And she's like, hey, listen, I got these patients who are coming in by EMS and by fire, in the EMS transports. And they're coming in and they end up, were being part of human trafficking rings, or brought in for the RNC. And I'm blown away by this. I'm like, this, and then of course this happened at the DNC, and Michelle's telling me about all of this, and I'm thinking, how did we miss this? And she says, well, there's these signs that you guys can look for in the physical environment, and they're just, the EMS is not capturing it. They're not seeing it. And we're going to talk a little bit about how this is a crime in plain sight. And it's kind of like, if you don't know what you're looking for, you don't know what you're looking at. And so at first I really did not believe that EMS had any role in this fight. And I really didn't understand it, what it all entailed. And as Michelle just sat there and started describing these scenes of these victims, and I thought, well, I've seen that in my career. I mean, I've been in fire and EMS for 20 years. And I've seen that. Oh, I've seen that. Oh my gosh, I've had a call like that. I thought, really, man, maybe we really do have a role in this. And one of my roles at the fire department, I work as an intelligence liaison officer. So I work between the city's public safety division and our federal, state, homeland security partners. So as information, this is all after 9/11. So as information goes, from the top up down to the local municipal level, things that we see at the local municipal level go on the way up. And I thought, well, maybe this stuff, if we're involved in the intelligence gathering for, terrorism and infrastructure, terrorism, hate crimes, and we're seeing this type of stuff, maybe we really do, the whole idea of see something, say something, maybe we can apply that to human trafficking. And so we really started digging at, like, what is EMS's role in human trafficking? So we go to the Google machines and put in, like, EMS human trafficking, and you get these standard sites. Department of Homeland Security's Project Blue campaign, which is their federal training for local law enforcement, local fire and EMS on what to look for. But it was so generic. And it was written by people at the federal level who aren't on the ground level like myself and Michelle in the emergency department, but really for the pre-hospital care, it really wasn't, it didn't apply. It just wasn't realistic. It's kind of like watching Chicago Fire or Chicago PD. It ain't real. It's not The Wire, by the way, which is real. We'll talk about that again too. We started applying it. So just looking back at the career, and then so basically what we did was, like, no one has a training on this, made for fire and EMS, for fire and EMS, by fire and EMS, and, like, let's make it. So Michelle, bringing her expertise, Michelle's got a doctorate in nursing. This is one of her parts of her thesis, was looking at human trafficking, and she's working on that project at the time. She's well respected. I mean, every cop, fireman, and medic in the greater Cleveland area knows her. She's just been a prolific speaker, prolific advocate for pre-hospital and firefighters and EMS personnel. So bringing her expertise the name of what we're, myself working at the hospital as an educator and bringing hospital resources out to the field, we just created this program, from scratch, and really, again, painted this picture of what I was going through personally, of not seeing, and to be able to identify human trafficking and put that on paper, so that when I went down this rabbit hole with Michelle, other people would start to travel down that rabbit hole through us telling this story. And that's really where it started. So the whole idea was, things I learned is that there's two different types of human trafficking. And this comes down to, we go to that the Department of Homeland Security's website, and Michelle and I did a little experiment. We went on the website and you look at, what does human trafficking look like? There's notions of that, white females tied up in basements, and they got bondage on their hands, and we as firemen and EMS, we're going to come in and swoop in and rescue them and that's not what it looks like. And that's why I found out going through my own career, and that's what we found in on these websites. So we really wanted to change the perspective for firefighters and EMS. That's not just sex trafficking. It's not just white females tied up in basement being traded off by foreign people, around the globe. That the other side of it that nobody really talks about is labor trafficking, which probably accounts for, a good proportion globally of the human trafficking trade. Especially us as Americans, where we're buying, I got my iPhone over here, I have my, my Nike sneakers. Like, where does that come from? Who says that people are getting equal pay for making the products that we as consumers in first world nations are buying? There's a lot of labor trafficking going into those products that we buy here. and then the sex trafficking really paint a picture of what those two things are. So, it is a huge problem. This is modern day slavery. There are owners, people that own people that work for them for free, and whether they're working for them in a store, in a factory, in the term a sweatshop, or they're working for them for free, turning out a product of sexual acts in order for the other person to profit. It's another form of slavery that's, since man has been on this earth, enslaving other people. And this is a modern form of it going on here, right here in this country, right here on this planet, across all economic classes, across all races, and it's all genders, and it's really a huge problem.
So there's the sex trafficking and labor trafficking, and it's forcing someone by the use of force, fraud, coercion, trickery, intimidation to perform some type of work or sexual act or labor act with, against their will. And it's estimated that there are about 40 million people globally that are affected by this. It's $150 billion industry. And, we always ask right. So we ask the students, what's the first, what do you think the most, number one would be? And it's, drugs, and then, human trafficking, and it's surpassed illegal firearms sale. And part of the reason why is because it's considered a high reward, low risk crime. And what I mean by that is that traffickers can make a lot of money on this. So if you were to sell drugs, you sell them one time and the consumer would use the drugs, and maybe they come back to you, maybe they don't. But you can sell a human being over and over again. And the average trafficker can make anywhere between $25,000 to $100,000 per person that they sell for either sex or labor trafficking. And it's so a high reward with low risk. In our state of Ohio, if someone is, a trafficker is sometimes charged with promoting prostitution, which is 6 to 18 months jail time. And then the trafficked person is charged with prostitution. So we're missing the boat here on what the crime is. And so low risk. So if you're a criminal, 6 to 18 months jail time isn't very much time. There's a supply and demand for this. So there's an economic principle in this. And because the demand is so high, there is people that are going to want to supply people for these kinds of trades, sex or labor trafficking. And so as long as there's a demand, and I think that's a real big topic that you could spend hours on, is what's going on in our society that we think that we are above other people, right? So it's a human rights, social justice issue, and that we think that we are able to trade and sell people still in this day and age. And then just basic system inequalities and disparities. If you look at our social system and its structure, if you are born into a location, geographic location, or into a class system, or into a community where you have resources, education, public safety, water, housing, all that stuff, you are less likely to enter into this lifestyle. However, it doesn't discriminate. Human trafficking affects every age, every sex, every race, every gender, everything. There's no discrimination with exploitation of people, but you are more vulnerable. So our marginalized populations and our some of our ethnic groups are at greater risk for human trafficking. But because of it, you have resources, the chances are that you're going to get sucked into this lifestyle is a little bit less.
Okay. I have a couple questions. So I heard you bring up the money aspect. You said that a person could make $100,000. Is that like the numbers that you're usually seeing? Because usually that's the main motivating factor behind what people tend to do, not especially, but when it comes to legal or illegal actions.
Right. So I think my experience as a nurse is from what my patients have told me, and also what the literature supports. And so it all really depends. I've had a patient that was sold multiple times when she was kidnapped, and she was under the impression that the buyers paid $25 to $30 for her services. There are other people that have been exploited, and they pay more. So according to the literature and the research, it really depends on what you're doing. And what your trafficker values you at. So the estimate is between $25,000 to $100,000 a year. And if you have more than one person you're exploiting, it can be a very lucrative job for business for the trafficker.
Okay. And my other question is, you said still, and that brought to my mind, long time ago, we can think about biblical times, maybe when you would think kind of the same stuff was going on. What do you think what role does newer technology that we have now play into this? Like, I know they shut down different pages, different internet sites. Do you think technology is this helping or hurting this case? And what do you think it could do to help or hurt?
Oh, I think technology has exacerbated the problem tremendously. Mm-hmm. Before you mentioned it, Backpage.com was one of the largest companies that was protected by some laws about trafficking, selling sex and underage people on the internet. Tom and I have had some stories that we talk about young people lured away through social media thinking they're talking to 14-year-olds, playing a video game or something like that. In reality, it's someone in their 20s, 30s, 40s, or whatever it is. So we also have the ability to use social media to educate people and get the message out so that it can help us. But I would think that social media has, and the dark web and the illegal activity has made it hard to catch people and also easier to sell people.
I think it's like really like any arms race. You think back to being children of the 80s, right? You watch the different countries up their technologies and, Star Wars programs and space races. There's always, even in this, the technology, there's always a race. So like Michelle said, there was using the internet. I mean, the internet is an information sharing and gathering tool. So you're sharing both legal and illegal information across the internet. But at the same time, I also think that there are tools that are being developed, through technology to help us fight human trafficking. And Michelle, what's the name of that one app? I mean, there's an app out there where if you go to a hotel, you take a picture of the inside of your room, because a lot of the victims of human trafficking, they'll be in hotel rooms and they'll be posted on these dark webs, and they'll be, when the police rescue someone, they find these, thumb drives or of child pornography, and they'll notice these people are in hotel rooms. They can never match up the hotel rooms, because there are these anonymous places. So there's apps out there where people like you and I can actually, every time you go to a hotel, you take a picture of your room, and then they'll use like imaging technology, matching technology to be able to say, okay, this, Tom Beers took a picture while he was in this hotel room, and my gosh, this hotel room is the same hotel room that we seen in the picture with this case from like 3 years ago. So they can help track that. But, going back to the idea that, there's, we were talking about the vulnerability, the vulnerable people, the youth, people that don't have support systems at home. And one of the things that I don't even think we touched base on, and it took me some time to really think about this, was gay, lesbian, LGBTQ communities. That vulnerability where you might have a support system at home, but you don't want other people to know about your secret. And there's a story that we share in the class. I'll share here about how technologies hurt this or exacerbate this problem. There was a boy, I think he was 13 or 14 years old, and he plays Fortnite. I have kids. I have 4 boys. Between the ages of 15 and 10, they play Fortnite and any of these video games. And the kid was in the chat room feature, and he was talking about, because he's being anonymous, nobody knows who his real name is. He's basically, he needs to tell someone his secret. So he shares his secret. He now makes himself vulnerable. And just like any predator, they find that vulnerability and they exploit it. So this boy was on there saying, hey, I'm 14. I think I'm gay. I can't tell my family because we live in Kansas. They're a very Christian-based family. They'll never understand. And what does this predator do? He snatches on it and goes, hi. Well, guess what? I'm 18 years old. I remember being your age 4 years ago. I also live in Kansas. I also had the same problem. I think I could help you. Why don't we meet? So now there's this connection. That vulnerability was exploited. The boy meets this 18-year-old, ends up not being an 18-year-old. And the boy went down to a local strip mall, a coffee shop to meet this person. And the boy disappeared. And they found him several months later in another operation, I believe it was in the state of Georgia, where the Georgia State Police were investigating a possible child pornography and prostitution ring. And they found this boy in Kansas locked away in the woods with several other children in a trailer. So there's that technology in it. For me, that really hits home. Anyone that's listening that has kids, I'll look at it this way. And someone explained to me, and I thought this is perfect. If you, especially when it comes to YouTube, video games, allowing your kids to have dinner. I mean, I'll go to Target and I'll watch like little kids, 5, 6 years old, sitting in the cart, watching YouTube with the headphones on. And someone explained to me, like, if there was no internet and you took your child and you lived across the street from a park, and every day you let your kid go to the park and sit on a bench, and every day you noticed a different stranger would come and sit next to your child and would talk to your child for an hour, maybe 2 hours a day, just sit there and talk on the bench, and you don't know what they're saying. Do you think that's right? Would you allow that? Of course, any parent would say, no, I would never let my kid go to the park, sit down on a bench, and let a stranger just chew their ear off for 2 hours. You don't know what they're saying, but that's what parents are doing. They're letting their kids go on that's exactly what the internet is. They go on YouTube, they go on these games, they go on these chat rooms. They don't know who they're talking to. You don't know who they're talking to. And these people are finding these cracks in their persona, maybe in their family structure, in their life, that they exploit or put ideas in their head of what is acceptable or not acceptable. So the internet is I agree with Michelle, is a real huge issue with, again, transmitting and sharing illegal activities of trading people. I mean, we trade credit cards over the internet, we trade drugs, so we also trade people. But at the same time, we really have to realize that children on the internet is a huge, huge issue with human trafficking.
For me, my kids, they play video games. I'm a big video game person, and I let my son play on my PlayStation, and he plays on my profile, so some people think they might be playing me. They're really playing him. But the thing about it is, I won't get him a headset. Every conversation he has is going to be heard by me right now at the age he's at. So I hear his friends talking to him and yelling at him and telling him he trash, and he tell them they trash and all that. That's all they do is just talk back and forth to each other. But I want to hear those conversations. I want to hear what's going on. The same thing with the tablets. I let my son and daughter play with the tablets. And, for a parent, sometimes you feel like it's kind of annoying to have to hear what they're doing. You're trying to do your own thing, maybe read, maybe concentrate on something. But just hearing like that background, what they're listening to, seems to help me out. I'm not saying he hasn't seen anything he probably isn't supposed to, but that's what I do to try and keep track.
Yeah. Traffickers are very, they're business people, they're smart. And if you were to describe, what does a trafficker look like, so what would you say? Do you have any idea of what a person who traffics looks like?
Well, a trafficker, the one doing the trafficking, no, I have.
The Wire season 2. No, here we go.
Right, that's what me and Tom talking about. The Wire season 2. They had the girls
ahead of its time,
locked in a shipping container.
Right, and I tell you that was probably the biggest shock to me over the years working with survivors of human trafficking, because often the person that is trafficking them is someone that they knew and trusted and loved. Mm-hmm. It could be a family member, a parent. I've seen parents trafficking their own children. in exchange for drugs, usually is what I see. They're addicts. It's some type of relative or someone that's befriended them and earned their trust. So it's a grooming process, and it's very calculated. Sometimes they send the women out to befriend these young people, young girls and boys, and, it takes a couple months for them to gain their trust and provide them with basic needs that they might not be getting at home, such as, love and affection, attention. There might be abuse going on at home, so there appears not to be an abuse in this relationship. They get food and water and housing and clothing and gifts, and that goes on for a while until there's a bond created, and then slowly they're integrated into this world. So it's very calculated, and I don't know if you've heard the, terms of trauma bond or, Stockholm syndrome, but often victims don't ask for help for many reasons, out of fear, no one will believe them, that bond, addiction. So there's a lot of things that prevent people from asking for help, but the person that's trafficking them can often be someone that they're familiar with.
Mm-hmm. And as I was going to add, sometimes they just don't see anything wrong with it. And, there was a family in, again, we're talking about using the world's vulnerable populations. There's a family that had citizenship in Syria, and they also had citizenship in outside of London, some of the most expensive real estate in the world. So they're British and Syrian citizenships. But what they were doing during the Civil War was in Syria, they were going to the Syrian refugee camps, intentionally putting themselves in there and then finding people that were, again, these are wolves. So they're looking for the lone sheep, someone that didn't have a support structure. And they would say, hey, listen, I also have British citizenship. I'm going to lie and say that you're my cousin, and I'll take responsibility for you. We're going to get you out of here. And they would bring them back to London. These folks would be basically indentured servants and slaves. They would put them up in these large apartment buildings. So think of like all the apartment buildings, maybe in Chicago or the Cleveland area. We're not talking about the expensive ones downtown. We're talking about, just on the fringe where, this family owned all of these apartment buildings where, maybe 20 units per building, multiple buildings stacked up in the same area. And they would use these folks they brought back as basically slaves. And they would every time an apartment got turned over, which was frequently, these folks would be in charge of painting, cleaning, doing the carpets. And then when no one was living in these apartments, they would be basically living in the closet. They would have very little means. And so, now that again, I read this story and I thought, man, as a fireman, I've seen this. Well, we did an inspection on a large apartment building, a multi-family dwelling. And in the basement, there's an underground parking garage. There was a small room, and you could see that someone was living in there. So that kind of affects how, as a firefighter and a fire inspector, that you're going out and you're looking at these things like no one should be living in a parking garage. No one should be living in a closet. No one should be living in an abandoned home or abandoned apartment. And sometimes it's because that's the shelter they've been given, because it doesn't cost the owners, the slave owners, the traffickers, it doesn't cost them anything. So they just put them up in these abandoned places.
Okay, so Michelle, I heard you said patients, and then you said, let me change it to victims. I heard that. So we obviously go out on calls as firefighters, even police officers. They don't call them patients, but the public that they serve. What should we be looking for? What are some of the signs that we can see?
It's a great question.
Can I take that one?
It's a great question. What?
Can I take that question from a firefighter's perspective?
Well, yes. But let me tell you. All right, you go first, and then I'll talk about the clinical part of it.
So when we're out in the field, we're similar to like domestic violence cases, where we find someone maybe talking for the other person, they can't speak for themselves. But in the physical environment, this goes back to how we opened up. Michelle's explained these things to me. Looking for, and this I've seen it, bars on the, in some neighborhoods you have the bars on the outside, the security bars. Instead of having them on the outside, how about security bars on the inside?
Okay.
If you're not looking for it, it's such an easy thing to miss, right? Obviously, you go to a house that's on fire, you're going to notice it right away when you're trying to gain entry. But when you're on a standard EMS call or a standard maybe CO call and you see this, or how about you walk down the hall, maybe it's a larger duplex house, very similar to the houses in Cleveland area and in Chicago, I'm sure. And you see that all the individual rooms have padlocks on the outside. Why do all the bedrooms have padlocks on them? Maybe signs of, again, especially from a fire prevention perspective. Again, going back to a similar story I just shared, we went to a small mom and pop operation where we came in for the inspection. We smelled like incense burning. It was a type of store where incense should have been burning. And as we were walking around, the person was working there. We walked by a janitor's closet, and in the janitor's closet was a mattress, some little foodstuffs, some old paperbacks, and what it appeared, and that's where the incense had just been snuffed out before we walked in. We had our badges and everything on, so the authorities are coming in, and this person must have snuck out the back door, but they were living there. So this person was living there because they were, again, potentially doing some type of labor work for free, and they were living in this commercial property. And of course, that makes sense because if you're the owner and you have a regular family and a business and a house, you're not going to put this person up in your house. You're going to do the cheapest thing possible to keep this person sheltered and fed and watered. And so you're going to put them up in that commercial property. And so that, from a firefighter's perspective and a fire prevention perspective, that makes a huge difference because you roll up at 3 o'clock in the morning on a commercial taxpayer property, you're not going to be thinking someone's living inside that place. It's empty parking lot, it's 3 o'clock, like your tactics are completely different. You're more likely to go to a defensive or a transition attack rather than, going in and doing a primary search for victims in a commercial property at 3 o'clock in the morning. But if you find out that, if you can prevent that tragedy from happening, like in the aftermath, you're doing an overhaul and you find that someone was actually inside that building and you're trying to figure out, like, why were they there? Was it from a fire perspective, fire prevention perspective, your junior company inspections, look for these signs. And I'll mind you, I had seen this after I went through this training, Michelle and I developed this training, and I, again, went down the rabbit hole with her. But if I go back through my career, I'm sure I could have found other incidents like this. I just didn't see it. Like, I just kind of glossed, there's a mattress on the floor in the closet of this commercial property. And you ask, like, why do people do that? Well, especially mom and pop businesses and smaller local businesses, if they have to compete in an e-commerce society, they have to compete against Amazon and Walmart and Target and these big stores in the internet e-commerce. So that margin of profit for them is so small that if they can get some free labor to come work for them, so they don't have to pay someone to sit in their store for, and actually pay that person, they're going to their profit margin is a little bit larger for them. So that's something to really consider.
Hey, Michelle, the clinical aspect, please.
So, I think that the medical concerns, that if you see a patient, what we see is they come in for everything, right? But high reoccurrence exposures or testing or treatment for sexually transmitted infections.
Okay.
Saying they have medical or multiple sex partners, if they were to talk about that. Drug and alcohol abuse. We think that people are addicted to alcohol or drugs because of, whatever reason, but not thinking that perhaps they're being controlled by drugs, particularly by their trafficker. So people that come in with physical assault or trauma, the injury doesn't match the story. Behaviors that you might see either in the ER or a medical office or even in the field, or I think Tom mentioned someone speaking for them, someone who doesn't have documentation or ID, someone who might not know where they are or what day it is, someone who is hypervigilant and anxious, have a depressed mood or a flat affect, avoid eye contact. So those are just some subtle signs. Again, none of this is one and done kind of deal. It just maybe will help you understand that there's more questions to ask. And the one case that made me go to Tom and talk to him about it was an asthmatic. And EMS brought her in and they just said, hey, we got this asthmatic. It was really weird in the house. So these 3 girls were all living in the same room and there was only one bed. And as soon as they said that, I was like, really? Tell me more. And they kind of described the rooms in the house, and the girls were young and they said they were sisters and they obviously weren't sisters. And, the one girl is an asthmatic. And if you think about it, that's your lifeline, your lungs to breathe. And if you're had asthma since you were a kid, the routine, you have to have your inhalers, what it's like not to get enough oxygen and to feel like you're suffocating. And here's a 19-year-old that hasn't, she only goes to the ER for rescue inhalers. Why isn't she getting the medical care she needs? So people that are going to the hospital when it's for crisis and rather don't have the ability to follow up on maintenance things. So if it was a diabetic who doesn't have insulin, or, a heart failure patient that doesn't have their Lasix or whatever it is, someone that's always going to the hospital for primary care can be one thing, or it could be a sign that they don't have access to health care for whatever reason, right? So tattoos sometimes can be a red flag as well. There used to be where there was a barcode that people came in with, and that barcode was like, I own you, this is your property, we're going to scan you, kind of thing. And then once the traffickers are aware that people know what that means, they switch to a different type of tattoo. So for me, patients, there was a survey that was done of survivors of human trafficking, and they asked them, did you seek medical care while you were being trafficked? And 88% said yes. 88% said they had been in a healthcare facility while actively being trafficked and were not identified or offered resources or screened for that. So 63% are through the emergency department. So your EMS is definitely seeing these patients. Yeah. And so these subtle signs, several of them together, should be red flags that something's going on, and you're giving a handoff to that nurse what you think, like this guy was talking to her, he wouldn't leave her alone, we told him he couldn't come with us, but he's following her here, or she said she doesn't speak English, but she does, or whatever that is. Giving a good handoff to nursing or the receiving person is really important, and hopefully they've had some training or concern. Even you can say, I'm concerned that this patient might be a victim of trafficking. And then they would be like, oh, okay, we'll look into it. And hopefully they have a forensic nursing program. I don't know where in Chicago you guys take your patients, but if you suspect human trafficking, you should definitely be taking them to a facility that has access to a forensic nurse who can come in and do some screening and develop a rapport with that patient to see if they would disclose.
And maybe for people listening from across the country, depending on your state, you probably already have a legal responsibility or legal obligation to report anything that you suspect, just like we do with child abuse and elder abuse. But I think everyone that's listening in this conversation right now would agree that we definitely have a moral obligation to report any of our findings that we have. And Michelle, by the way, I got to go back. You got to finish up the story on the inhaler, because that's like one of the best stories too. So this girl,
which one?
The girl with the inhaler. Like, follow up with that. Yeah. So just to illustrate that not everybody gets this concept.
Right. So basically, EMS brings in this girl and she's asthma exacerbation. We gave her 3 dual nuts, and her and her sisters all live in the same room, and it was weird. And I don't know, there was 100 degrees and there was no air conditioning, and they were all in their pajamas, and just a bunch of red flags. And so I have access to her medical chart, and I can see that she's had early encounters with the juvenile court at 13, 14 years of age. She's been, she told me that I asked her about why she doesn't have inhalers. She doesn't have health insurance. Does she have a job? She's currently not working because she had complications from an unplanned pregnancy. So she had terminated a pregnancy and she was having complications with that. So no medical insurance, no job, no a recent abortion, early encounters with the juvenile court. And I said to her, how do you pay your bills? And she says, my boyfriend pays for things, which is, again, another red flag that a 19-year-old has a boyfriend who pays for everything, right? And so I was asking a question. She goes, I know what you think, and it's not that. And I said, well, do you have to do anything, to repay him for paying your rent or paying your phone? And she's like, it's not what you think. And she got teary-eyed, and she turned her head from me. And I said, I can help you. And she said, what are you going to do? Put me in a shelter? So, I didn't have to say, are you being trafficked? I said, are you safe? Do you have to do anything that you don't want to do in order to repay this debt? And she knew exactly what I was talking about. And she wasn't ready to disclose. It's that cycle of domestic violence. If you think about it, it's the same thing. She's getting her needs met. Someone's paying for her to live. Someone's, she had her nails done. She had her hair done. So maybe this isn't the worst thing that's happening to her right now because she's surviving and she's doing this. And so there's another whole podcast we could do, Seb, really on what is human trafficking, what is prostitution, and what is the sex industry, sex workers, right? And sometimes people think that every prostitute out there is doing this because they want to. And there's survival sex, right? So this can get very gray. There's not black and white with this. So in the end, I just said to this young lady, just keep coming back. We'll take care of you. I want to help you. And, we ended up discharging her, and there was no disclosure. But I charted what I saw. I charted what I felt and thought. And hopefully someone will keep screening her when she comes back.
Hold on. What did the doctor say, Michelle?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I keep forgetting this stuff. So when the doctor came out, she's like, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And I said, yeah, I think she's being trafficked. And she's like, what? I was thinking she had bronchitis. What the heck are you talking about trafficking? So, yeah. I mean, it just shows you that people don't always think the way my brain has been trained to think now, because I'm completely invested and committed to this cause. So I think about it. And when EMS gives me strange information, I try and think of how would I screen or help this patient differently. And not all nurses have had my training. And that's why we do these kinds of trainings and education and try and reach as many people as possible and get people to understand what the red flags are, and how to screen people.
And EMS brings a lot of these folks in, talk about the traffickers look at these victims as property. And so I'm going to relay it in another way. If your car breaks down and you can't drive anymore, it's got a problem, how do you get it to the place where it's going to get fixed? You call a tow truck, right? You call a tow truck, the tow truck takes it to the place it gets fixed. So for traffickers, especially if they're managing multiple people, like Michelle alluded, like if you make $25,000 to $100,000 per person, whether it be in labor trafficking or in sex trafficking, you're not going to take the time away from your business. You have other product you have to worry about. You're going to call the free tow truck that comes and picks up your broken car, quote unquote, which is EMS. They come up and it's quote unquote free, and they pick up this your property and they take it to the doctor at the emergency department, which is pretty much in and out. You can pay cash. You don't even really give your own name because the laws are written that they can't turn you away. And your quote unquote product gets fixed by the quote unquote mechanic, and it was a free tow truck. And so they call EMS. And why do they call EMS? Because they don't think that EMS and firefighters have the same level of training and sophistication to be able to recognize these things as police officers. But as we tell everyone all the time, EMS and firefighting is the largest intelligence gathering apparatus in the United States. We have warrantless entry. We go into people's homes all the time, and we use this to our advantage all the time, right? We get drug victims and gang shootings in the back of our ambulance, and we try to get some information from them. They don't want to give it to us. And what do we say as firemen?
We always got the line, I'm not the police.
Right, I'm not the police.
And you can tell me whatever.
Because everybody loves a fireman, right? My cat's stuck in the tree. They don't call cops, they call the firemen. Everybody loves a fireman. And sorry to the cops out there, this is true. So we use that to our advantage. People disclose things to us. So, and so again, especially with that idea of domestic violence and getting people to be able to disclose and someone speaking for them, we have this great tool that we bring with us. It's called the box, right? The squad box.
Yeah.
That's a moment of isolation. And I say this in our class all the time. Even if people don't disclose to us, if we can line up the pitch just perfect for these folks, and get the idea. Like once we get them isolated, say, listen, I don't know what's going on. I think something's going on. I'm a fireman. If you want to tell me, don't tell me. But when we get to the hospital, there might be someone there. Like I'm thinking, either you can talk to someone there. There's people trained at the hospital who can help you out in this situation. You may not want to disclose to me. And guess what? They're probably not going to, because you're just some stranger. They're only having for 5 or 10 minutes. But what you're doing, I would relay this to the concept of I was a former field artillery officer. So softening the target, right? So we're softening the target a little bit and giving that idea to the person. Like, you may not disclose to me, but now I Leonardo DiCaprio to you, right? I put the Inception in your head. Your idea. Okay. Now, in the next 10 minutes, while we're going to the hospital, you're thinking about, how do I disclose, right? So you soften that target with that idea. And so by the time they get to see someone like Michelle or one of her team members or any forensics nurse or SAE nurse that's out there at your hospital you transport to, they've had time to think about, is this the moment that I'm going to disclose? They've now thought about and come up with a plan on how they're going to do it. And so, again, that preparation, given that idea, just the right words, that psychiatric care that, when I was going through paramedic school 20 plus years ago, like, that was a big thing, psychiatric care, right? For a psychological first aid, I think we called it. And so just talking to people, making sure they're reassured, and you may not have all the answers, but give them some ideas and some notions just helps down the line with people like from Michelle and her folks.
Well, letting you guys go and just kind of answer pretty much every question I had, because I was going to ask, who do we report to? How do we report to? You guys covered that. I was going to bring up the fact that, we have like child abuse, elder abuse, Department of Aging, contact them. Is there anything to say, hey, contact this department and help this person out? But it seems more like they have to disclose to you. So like you said, if you soften the target, and then frequency, because if the person keeps coming in, you keep seeing them after a while, you can kind of say, hey, you ready to talk, or you got anything else to say? It's just kind of helping the person out. So you guys did an outstanding job of answering those questions for me.
Yeah, and again, for your listeners out there, if there's something they want to do or can do, look at your state, see if you have laws on the books that require some type of educational platform for firefighters, paramedics, in recognizing human trafficking. Like Michelle and I do this lecture series up here, and we've given it at a national level at some conferences. But you look at a map, like most states don't even require human trafficking training for firefighters and paramedics, which is crazy because, like I just said, we have warrantless entry. We go in people's homes all the time. But if you're a hairdresser, at least in Ohio and most places in the country, or a nail tech, you have a cosmetology license, you are required to have some type of form of continuing education, and it has to be hours allocated towards recognizing human trafficking, because especially in the sex trafficking, you want your product, right, to look good so they get their hair and their nails done. But for us, there's no training. So right now in Ohio, Michelle and I are working with Attorney General, trying to change that so that there's a requirement as part of our recycle period, both for fire and EMS, to have some awareness training in human trafficking. So any listeners out there interested in the topic, look at your own state. What are the rules and regulations currently on the books, and what can you do to change them? Because really, I'm nobody. Michelle, we're just two people came up with this idea, and we're trying to champion this cause in Ohio. And if we just get some other people to champion these causes in their states, eventually we'll have not so much of a patchwork of rules and regulations, but a unified command of being recognizing human trafficking.
That's an outstanding cause. Michelle, you was going to say something? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I think the other thing is not knowing your community and what resources you have, probably more than you're aware of. And so one of the things that we did here in Cuyahoga County is there's a collaboration, the Collaborative to End Human Trafficking, where about 60 different organizations in Northeast Ohio all belong to. And they represent so many different points of entry that can help survivors of trafficking. So we have, Case Western Reserve Law Clinic that helps provide free legal aid to victims of trafficking. We have the Rape Crisis Center there. We have the Renee Jones Empowerment Center that does, housing and other resources after you've left that lifestyle, you've been rescued, or whatever your needs are with jobs and housing and therapy. There is forensics nurses. There are just the Salvation Army, so many different groups, right? So the point is that there's all these different groups. And when I first joined it, I realized there was there's law enforcement, there's prosecutors, but there's no EMS. And I thought, that's so interesting because they bring us our patients. How are they missing from this table? And so we worked with them, and we have a local law enforcement, the Sheriff's Department, a task force for human trafficking. So we work with them as well. And Tom and one of the fire chief from East Cleveland, Chief Kaliga, we worked together to create like a protocol or guideline on what you might see in the field are signs of human trafficking. And then if you do suspect that, what do you do next? Where do you go? Yeah. Who do you call? And so, explain where all the forensic nursing programs are in Northeast Ohio, what age groups they take, what phone numbers you can have, the task force phone number, what you should document, suggest best practice suggestions for internal things from Tom and Chief Saliga's point of view for, what they want to see their departments doing. And so they created this protocol, and we're going to distribute it to all the different departments, and they'll have it in their EMS trucks to remind them of what they should do or where they should go if they see this. So if you're thinking the next step in your community, maybe partnering with one of your local hospitals that have a forensic nursing program, seeing if there is a rape crisis center and do they have a response team? Is there something similar to the collaborative that you guys can join and be a part of so that, I'm sure you have protocols. Do you have a human trafficking protocol in your fire department,
Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a collaborative or you want to stick within the realm of public safety, guaranteed, again, human trafficking is a huge priority with the Department of Homeland Security. Every part of the country has a fusion center, and this is developed after 9/11 for processing information. So if you have information on potential human trafficking, get the number. It should be in every fire commander's cell phone. It should be in the cell phone of every truck, again, for not just for terrorism, but human trafficking or infrastructure issues, infrastructure tampering. But that you can call that fusion center. That what they do is they take your information, and then all they do is gather information from all different places. Again, fusion center, and then they make sure that it gets to the right place. So if you have you're somewhere in the country, you're like, well, we don't have a collaborative, or we don't have these types of resources. Who do I report it to? You can just call your regional fusion center. Every part of the country is covered by a regional fusion center. They want to hear from you. It's to see something, say something, not just in terrorism, but in human trafficking and drug trade and all these different things that we face as threats to our society. And you just call this phone number and you give your information, say what agency you're from, and they'll make sure that it gets to the right place. They're basically a giant public safety and homeland security operator system, a switchboard, right? Like from the 1940s. That's all they do.
Okay. You guys gave us a ton of information, and I really, really appreciate it. I'm gonna look up those numbers and give that contact information at the beginning of the show and again at the end of the show. For you two, do you have anywhere you would like anybody to contact you on this subject or any subject relevant to this topic?
Absolutely. You guys, Tom, we could share our PowerPoint, right?
Yeah, so we can actually, Seb, we can probably share a PowerPoint if you want to post that or host that somewhere on your server or your site. People can look at that. We'll give it a free link. People can go through it. Kind of get the statistics. It's when we developed this program, it doesn't say the organizations that we represent or work for on there, because we want people to be able to use this and take it and be able to use it as their own. And for other types of subject matter on this, they can contact me. I'm really big with social media, especially on Twitter for fire, EMS, and human trafficking issues. And my Twitter handle is @OneTallMedic, and it's spelled out ONETALLMEDIC. One Tall Medic.
Michelle, how about you?
You can reach out to me at Reali, MREALI 32 at yahoo.com. And, if anyone has questions about forensic nursing or, the medical side, the clinical side of it, I'd be happy to set up phone calls or share my knowledge with people.
And I got a lot of, people contact me over social media a lot, what's going through these courses or in person. Guys and gals from the field, they'll always bounce ideas off me like, well, I had this, you guys gave this talk, or I heard you give a talk, or I heard a recording of the talk, or, and I had this case or that case, and like throw ideas and things like, what do you think? What do you think? And we'll be happy to take those types of calls and discuss it. Because like I said, going through my own career, like I had cases, and now I look back in retrospect, I'm like, oh yeah, that was human trafficking.
Right.
And again, it happens across all types of neighborhoods. I think I mentioned this story to you about, a large brothel that happened in a very, very expensive neighborhood, filled with $1 million homes, and it was a high-end brothel. And people just, they didn't see it. They couldn't tell that there were girls being prostituted for like big money, in this place. So it's not just a lower income. It's not just a black issue. It's not Hispanic. It's a global issue. It's white people. It's poor people. It's middle class. It's educated. It's uneducated. Drug addicts. Pick a person on the planet. They're affected by this.
It's possible, right?
It's totally possible.
Yep.
Well, like I said, you guys bringing the subject matter to me and giving me the opportunity to showcase it and give it an episode I appreciate a whole lot. And like Michelle said, we could sit around and talk about this for a whole nother show. Just what's the difference between labor and sex trafficking. But for this one, we'll end here. But thank you so much for coming on.
The thanks is all ours, man. Thank you for giving us your platform.
Absolutely. You guys, you have a great day. And after this, it'll be a little after monologue. But thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Seth.
Bye.
Bye.
This has been a Fire and Iron Media production. You have something to say, people want to listen. How's that, Daddy?